Whenever you are ready, Patty.
Hi guys.
Hey, Patty.
I'm glad we can have a meeting like this. Thanks, Justin, for pulling this together for us.
Anytime.
Okay. Right now I'm the acting assistant treasurer for the state. We're waiting for the bylaws to be finished. And we've been pretty lax with giving treasurer's reports. I'll do them quarterly or half a year, but we're going to be doing them monthly from now on. And that's what our bylaws say they should be, and that's what the state bylaws say they should be. So this one, since I haven't given one since December 31st, this is the first quarter, and then going forward, it'll be every month. Our opening balance in January was $7,955.53. During the first quarter, we've had income of $12,440, but a lot of that had to do with the nukes and the calendars, and we did get membership money. Our expenses are also up there, $12,396.68 because of the nukes, the calendars. And I had received a New Jersey annual report that has to be filed with the state. I don't remember who sent it to me, but I guess their name had been on it for years. And this is the first time they sent it to me. They forwarded it to me. So we had to pay for like 2 or 3 years with a penalty. So that cost us $283. But going forward, I think it's like $75. We made $700 on the nukes, where it's only cost us so far $97.43 for the refreshments, with everybody chipping in and putting money in the bucket that Landy made for us. And our membership monies in so far are $439. I'll have a better handle on what our membership is, how many new ones. We're also changing that between the state and the member and the branches, so that we're not sending the state money, the state's sending us money. So we're changing the whole procedure on that too, from the state level down. So we have transactions in transit for $1,381 that have not hit the branch yet. So our ending balance as of March 31st to prove to the bank statement is $9,473.85. And that's it, unless anybody has any questions.
Patty, whenever you get a moment, can you just supply me with a paper copy, or if Ron, if you recorded all that, great. Oh wait, no, Charlie, you're a recording secretary, right?
Well,
I sent a hard copy to Charlie Sporn and to Mike.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll make sure.
For the purpose of the minutes, I'm only going to be recording the opening and closing balances and leave out all the gory details.
That's perfect.
Yeah,
I just want to make
you'll
sure
have the hard copy.
Great,
Yeah.
thanks, Patty.
Perfect.
Who's chairing the meeting, by the way? I missed that. Who's chairing tonight's meeting? Do we have a chair?
I don't think we do.
Okay.
I think it's Justin.
Hi, I'm the chair tonight.
All right, Justin, you're officially elected by acclamation.
Thank you. Such a hard election.
I guess we have to make the motion to accept the treasurer's report.
Yeah, accepted.
Yeah.
Oh, I so move.
I accept.
Who seconded?
Landy.
I'll second.
I second.
All right. It's been seconded and thirded and fourth. I think we lost the treasurer.
And I'll only turn your mic on if you want to say nay. Otherwise, we'll say it's everybody accepted it.
Dean,
On
we
the
can't
vote.
hear you, but don't worry about it. It's accepted. We are going to record this meeting, and we record the treasurer's report. We'll send out a link to everybody in an email afterwards, in case you want to revisit this in the future. And we are going to continue to use this for as long as it is safe. Jim is going to be talking about bait hives and capturing swarms and using them correctly. And I think this is going to be a great presentation. And I'm so happy that we have as many people as we do here, and that we're able to have a meeting and get to talk while everyone else is, cooped up at home.
Justin, what is the count of people we have?
I think 37. I'm showing
Yeah.
37 users.
I'm seeing 37 right now.
Okay, cool.
I'm sure more people are probably going to join in. I've seen a few people fluctuate. And I know this is new for everybody, so numbers will be what they'll be.
Can you use our attendance as the attendance sheet that we usually sign?
That's a great idea. Yeah, I will. I'll collect that now. So, Jim, you can just proceed on with the meeting, and I'll pull a list of people so that we know who attended this meeting.
Okay, thanks, Justin.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so yeah, so listen, I'm so thrilled to be the inaugural speaker with the new platform, and thanks to Justin and Landy for helping me put this together. And just a couple, so there's a chat box in the middle, and people can see kind of in the center left of their screen, there's a chat box. So if you have questions, you could either talk about it with your microphone, or you could put a message in the chat box here. And I'm going to go through my presentation now. My presentation looks small on the screen, but this box right here, the full screen, I don't know, Justin, can people do that on their own without me being full screen?
Yes.
Okay.
If, there should be a little icon in the bottom right-hand corner of people's presentation, and it looks like a bunch of little arrows. And if you click that, it'll make the presentation full screen.
It's this thing right here. So I'm not going to make it full screen because I want to be able to see if people have questions and whatnot. But if you want to make it full screen, by all means.
I can't go full screen. That little box doesn't work.
Well, are you on your iPad?
Yeah.
Yeah, get off your iPad.
You want me to leave?
I'll tell you what. Let me go full screen, and then is this better?
It won't make a change for us. It has to be done on the client side.
Oh, so you can't see that I'm in full screen now?
No,
Okay,
it'll look
so
the same for everyone.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Okay, great. So by way of introduction, Jim Feeney, member of the Essex County Beekeepers Society, and I live in Verona. My wife and I live in Verona, and she's very supportive of my beekeeping, and in fact, she's a guest on tonight's presentation. So I'm upstairs and she's downstairs listening in, so taking advantage of the technology. So just want to acknowledge Seaton is on. And I'm thrilled to talk to you about my experiences with swarm trapping, and this is just one person's opinion, right? It's what works for me. I've kind of been into it for 4 or 5 years now, so I'm a big user of, there's a Facebook group for swarm trapping. I read on BeeSource about all sorts of people's experiences, and I try to distill it down for what works in northern New Jersey, because what works in other parts of the country doesn't necessarily work in Essex County, which is a very suburban area. So my ideas may or may not work for you, but this is pretty cool that we can share ideas and maybe talk about experiences during the presentation or after the presentation. So my contact information is at the bottom. So if you want to email me offline, that's cool. And let's just launch into it. So. All right, so everybody wants more bees, right? That's the experience of beekeepers, is that it seems like you can never have enough bees. Like the biggest lie you can tell yourself is, I'm going to start with 1 hive, and then 3 years later you got like 10 hives. So, but stuff happens, right? I mean, bees die, they die over the winter. There's mite issues, the queens die. So we're always looking for more bees, and there's several ways that you can increase your apiary. But at least in my way of thinking, each one of these methods has its pros and its cons, except for swarm trapping, which I think is really just pros, which I'll get into it. So you got your packages, your nukes. You can get it as a swarm call list, which I think that New Jersey Beekeepers has one, and also some local groups have them. And then you could do swarm trapping, which is the topic of tonight's presentation. So this might be a little hard to see, but so packages, right? Somebody told me this once, and I thought it was very funny. They said buying packaged bees is like moving bees into a studio apartment. They have no furniture, they have no job, and they have no food. And by the time they build up, especially in New Jersey, you've missed the flow, because the flow is happening now, and probably continues through June. So, it's challenging sometimes to get a package of bees to 70 pounds of honey by the end of September, because again, they're moving into a brand new apartment with nothing in it, and they've got to create their own world, in a few short months. And as we know in New Jersey, the flow is very short, right? The flow is basically over by mid-July, I would guess at best. Having a fall flow is questionable, especially around me in Verona and Montclair. The second thing is that when you buy a package, your queens are from out of state. These packages are created from other states, which are warm, so that they can build the packages up and get them here by now. So basically, Georgia and California are they're your big package states, and they take a queen that they raise elsewhere and they stick her with 3 pounds of bees and hope that the bees get to know the queen by the time the package makes it to New Jersey. So a lot of times the queens don't know the work, the queen does not know the workers, and vice versa. And somebody told me this once and I thought they were crazy. They said, up to 80% of queens in packages are superseded in the first season. And I thought that was way, way overstated. But to be frank with you, that's been my experience, is that the queens end up disappearing or dying and you don't know what happens. And I think it's because it's a very unnatural setup, right? You're forcing queens into bees, you shaken together, and you hope that they kind of get together on the ride north. And then you put them in a wooden box with nothing to work with except for sugar syrup. And the other issue with packages too is they often don't arrive on the date you expect them. So sometimes they'll say, okay, they're going to be on April 14th, they're coming in. And then on April 12th, you'll get an email saying, oh, you know what? Things got delayed down south. We couldn't put the packages together. Now they're going to come in on April 30th. Then on April 28th, you get an email saying they're going to come in May. So you can't really set your calendar by the packages. And a lot of times you have to drive a long distance for a meetup. I mean, I've gone to not Plymouth meeting, like right outside of Princeton, let's say, Quaker Bridge Mall, right? Like I live in Verona, right? So it's an hour and 15 minutes to go to the Quaker Bridge Mall to pick up 1 or 2 packages. It's a whole day process by the time you install them, etc. So I'm a big fan of the adage, time is money, right? So if you can make something easier on yourself, think about doing it, right? And then lastly, I circled that in the bottom, Man Lake this year, packages are $175 for a package, which it seems like every year they get more expensive. They were $90, then $100, then $120. So now you got to drive out to Wilkes-Barre. Even though I went to school in Wilkes-Barre and I'm a big fan, it's still an all-day event for $175 a package. So, and even if you want to pay that much money for a package, a lot of times they sell out. You've got to make your reservation in October, November, and if you have beehives, you don't know if you don't know if you're going to need them. If you want to maintain 2 or 3 beehives, you don't know if your bees are going to make it through the winter in advance. So you don't, at the time that you've got to reserve for them, a lot of times you don't even know if you're going to need them or not. So it's problematic. And then I've heard that because of COVID, I don't know if that's been anybody's experience. I think somebody shared on the Facebook page that there's been some cancellations or delays due to COVID getting packages up here. So again, this is the way we all start beekeeping, but it's fraught with, it's not without its issues, let me put it that way. So that's my 2 cents on packages. Then you've got nucleus colonies, right? So they're also expensive, although it's a better value than packages because you've got a cohesive colony with resources. You've got a laying queen that knows the brood. You've got pollen. You've got some, at least nectar, if not capped honey. So that it's a better way to go, in my opinion. Now you're going to pay a premium for early nukes, but it's worth the pay up, especially if there's if it's a locally overwintered nuke. So it's not coming from out of state, and it's a colony that's been through the winter in New Jersey. That's worth the money. But I found, having taken the Essex County beekeeping course years ago and listening to everything that Landy tells me, because her advice is the best, I'm all on mediums, right? So if you're on mediums only, 99% of people sell deeps for nukes. So if you're a medium person, it's very, very hard to get nucleus colonies, although Landy now has a limited number of medium nukes. And you'll see it's not going to work for you here. But I do have hyperlinks in this presentation. So when Justin posts the PDF file on the website, you'll be able to click through and get to all these resources that I have as part of the presentation. So I do have Landy for Goose Rock Farms. I have the link there. And then I would recommend, I mean, Grant's a good friend of ours and does a lot for us. So if you're looking for deep nuke, I would recommend Grant. Another issue too is that if you're a small supplier, if it's been a particularly brutal winter, you may not have as many nukes to sell in April as you thought you did in November because you had die-off. So a lot of times, even because of the best of intentions, you know, I might think I have 10 nukes to sell come April, and 5 of them die off, or I got to worry about restocking my own apiary. So I'm, you know, I put people on a waiting list. I'm not saying I don't do it, but people get put on a waiting list because the resources you thought you had in November don't bear fruit in April. So that's the issue with nukes. All right, so and again, the links are at the bottom for Landy's nukes and for Grant. All right, now you've got your swarm call lists, right? The pro here is that it's easy. It's free and it's easy to get on a list to be informed if a swarm happens. But there's a lot of people on these lists, like there could be a couple dozen people or more on these lists. And when you get the call, you're going to have to drop everything and head out to the swarm, or else someone else is going to say, hey, listen, I'll go grab it. I work in New York City, in Midtown. So any swarm that happens on a weekday between the hours of 6 a.m. and 8 p.m., I'm not going to get to. So it doesn't work for me. And then a lot of times, as you all know, people say, oh, I've got a swarm of honeybees. You drive out there and it's yellow jackets or it's something else. It's not, you know, a lot of times you have to say, hey, take a picture of what you think are honeybees because you might be wrong. You know, they're not even honeybees. And then what are you going to do? And also, what if the swarm is 50 feet up a tree? I mean, it's like, again, time is money. And, you know, you could buy a package for $175 or you could fall off a ladder and wind up in the hospital and rehab. To me, it's just not worth. It's not worth that particular thing is not worth it unless, like Adriana was talking about, a swarm just falls in your lap. It's not worth to me being on these lists, being a commuter. So the solution, I think, is what I call swarm trapping, and the benefits are it's very low cost to free to do this. The traps can be made with very basic carpentry skills. You're going to see pictures of my boxes. I'm no carpenter, trust me. But the stuff that I put together with the circular saw and you know, a stapler and a brad nailer from Harbor Freight and just some basic screws, it works, and it's really not that hard. So it's fun and effective. And again, my whole thing is time is money, especially weekend time when you commute. That's all you have. So your time, I would represent to you as valuable. So you hang the traps out and you pick the swarms up on your schedule at your convenience. The bees are already on the frames, so you can transfer them directly into your hive. You don't have to worry about cutouts if you get to the swarm fast enough. And then basically when you pick up a trap, you can hang a new trap there. Because a lot of times you've got scout bees from more than one hive checking out that location, and you can get multiple swarms in the same location. As a matter of fact, I find that over time, like I keep pretty diligent records. I will get multiple swarms at the same location every year, and other locations which I think are good. They look equally attractive to me, or as I would think a bee would find them attractive. You don't get anything. So generally, what happens is, and I'll get into this later. You know, I have people that sponsor these bait hives for me, and I'll give it 2 years. And if after 2 years I don't catch anything, I basically move on to another location. But I'll keep those people on the list to give them a jar of honey and some soap at Christmas time, just to thank them for their sponsorship. So again, the beauty of the swarm trapping is that, you know, your time is valuable and make it work for you. So the key to swarm trapping is you've got to have the swarm trap with the correct design, and that basically means the right volume to attract a swarm of bees. You want to install it in the right place, and you want to put it out at the right time of the year, which this year means like right now. I mean, ideally, in a year like we have with an early spring, you want to get those bait hives out like around St. Patrick's Day, because the bees are going to be checking out swarm locations about a month in advance of when they actually swarm. So it's not like you hang the box up and they swarm the next day. Although I have a gentleman in Glenridge that literally, as I was hanging the box last week, I had bees checking it out. And I hadn't even put the lure in yet, and that's never happened to me before. So that led me to believe, hey, that's a really good location. So again, I'm going to go through each one of these, the right design in the right place at the right time. And we'll go through each one of these in sequence. All right, so the right design. So think about the natural home of bees, which is the hollow of a tree, right? They will occupy a hole in the tree. There's 5 or 6 inches of insulation of trunk. It's a fairly small cavity. It smells like propolis and beeswax because a lot of times these hollows of trees have been occupied by swarms before. A colony dies off, and a new swarm will find the colony, and they'll be continuously occupied. So if you want, I should say, it's an effective swarm trap, not warm trap, but an effective swarm trap should have the best features of what you would consider to be the hollow of a tree. So you want it to be dark inside. You want it to be dry or insulated as much as possible from the elements. You want it to be the proper size, which, as Tom Seeley has determined, and again, there's a link there of a paper that Tom Seeley of Cornell University has done about, it's called Swarm Traps in Bait Hives, or Swarm Traps in the Honeybee. He did extensive studies in the Arnott Forest in upstate New York about what's the right size and how do you hang them and stuff like that. So Seeley recommends a size of 40 liters plus, and 40 liters is essentially the same size as a full deep. A 10-frame deep is 40 liters, and you want it to smell like home to the bees. So I find what's effective is you want to put some propolis tincture in there, and you want to take beeswax and paint it in the hives, and then that's going to give you a head start. So again, when you get the PDF, when Justin puts it out there, you can read, it's like 10 or 12 pages. Tom Seeley, it's free. It's quite good. All right. All right, so these are the 2 popular types of swarm trap, right? Number 1 is the one that the picture on the left is what they call the flower pot style. The reason they say that is because these are flower pots that you buy at the landscaping shop. They're basically fiber mesh bodies that you basically hang on a piece of plywood and stick on a tree. So the benefit is that they're very inexpensive. A lot of times people will take 2 of these flower pots and they'll put them together to get to the 40 liters. They're very inexpensive. They're certainly simple, but the downside is they're not durable. I mean, they're basically, it's paper pulp, right? So you're hanging this out in the elements between March and September, and they don't really last that long. And there's also a limited capacity. So, it doesn't have the 40-liter size that you're looking for. And if the bees are in there for any length of time, you're going to have to do a cutout when you finally go to collect them. You're going to have to cut it out the sheets of bees and put them in frames, which is not the end of the world, but it's a lot of work. And when you're dealing with 6 or 7 pounds of bees, they get testy. It's again, just make things simple on yourself. So the one on the right is the one that I have. So this is what they call the horizontal hive. So if you go to horizontalhive.com, there is a gentleman named Leo Sharaskin, who is, I think, out of rural Missouri, and he has all sorts of free resources for you. And so I have linked to the plans of what he calls the Swarm Trap Lite, which is what you see on the right-hand side. And that's basically, it's a very simple trap, about 20 inches high, that holds 5 or 6 frames, and you build it out of half-inch plywood. I mean, you can make 5 or 6 traps out of a 4x8 sheet of plywood, and this I find is the best solution. It's always slightly more complex than the flower pot style, but it's the right size. If you paint it, you can use it for many years, and then the bees establish themselves on frames. You can put anywhere between medium frames or even like a date ant style frame, a super deep frame you can put in there, or your 9-inch deeps. And you don't have to cut out the bees because you basically just take them right out of the trap and put them in your hive. So I find that this is the best solution for people, even with very minimal carpentry skills like me. You can make these very easily, and they're effective, and they last a long time. So this is what I would recommend as the swarm trap. So this is the ideal of what it looks like. Now you're going to see what mine look like. So the shape is the same, but it's a little bit jacked up because I'm not the best carpenter in the world. So here's my thing. Okay, so anatomy of a swarm trap. So this is the front of my swarm trap. Again, the volume of a box is 40 plus liters, about the size of a 10 frame deep. And if you go on Leo's site here, if you click on here, you're going to find the dimensions. He actually has a cut list from 4x8 plywood that shows you how to make every single cut and how to assemble them. There's step-by-step instructions, very easy to figure out. He's very generous with his time to basically put free plans out there. It's pretty cool. All right, so 40-liter size. The dimensions are not as Charles, did you have a question or?
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything that you're talking about. You have illustrations, but all I'm seeing is the Hollywood squares of people faces. But I'm not seeing
Do people not see? Does everyone see the presentation?
I'm not seeing a
Yeah, I can
presentation.
see it.
Where is it? Really?
You don't see it, Ron?
I don't see it.
I can see it.
Yeah, I can too.
Under the squares of people, there's a square with a presentation. You should click on that.
I got it. I'm fine.
Okay, great.
I found the icon. We're good.
All right, cool. All right.
While we have this slight interjection, I am going to Jim's PowerPoint will be up with the rest of the meeting documents. I'll post another link in the public chat now, just so everyone can know where it is, and all of the links that are throughout the slideshow, they'll work in that PDF, and you can open up and look at everything in detail that Jim has attached, because he put a lot of work into the links, and there is seriously a ton of content aside from just the PowerPoint. So I will post that in the chat in a minute, and it'll be there for you.
Okay, thank you, Justin. Very cool. Okay, so here's a picture of my swarm trap. I have several of these. Again, 40 plus liters. This thing's about 20 inches deep. The dimensions are not as important as long as the volume is correct. And I think so that where it says volume of a box right here, I have a link to a place where you can actually put your dimensions in, and it'll give you the volume of your like pretend box in liters. So you can play around with like, hey, I want to go 8 frames wide, but I want it to be 12 inches deep. Is that going to be 40 liters? So if you click on that, you're going to be able to figure out for yourself. It's like a what if tool where you put your length, width, and height in, and it'll tell you the volume of a box. So the dimensions are not as important as long as the volume is correct. But basically about this size is about right. The reason is you could make the box wider and more shallow, but then you've got to invest more frames in it. Like you've got to put 8 frames in instead of 5. So if you put 10 of these things out, all of a sudden you start, you have more money out there in terms of hardware than maybe you want to have. It's up to you what your budget is, kind of a thing, So a large trap will catch a small swarm, but large swarms will not move into a small cavity. So that's why people sometimes will put 5-frame deep nukes out as swarm traps, and they do not work as well as this, because you will see when you put these things out that the scout bees will actually measure. You're going to see scout bees going like this, like literally hovering up and down and going here, and they'll pop inside, and they're going to measure the inside of the box. The bees are master carpenters, so they're going to measure the size of the cavity and go back to the home hive and say, I found a cavity of the right dimensions. So again, you'll catch a small swarm in this box, but a large swarm will not move in to a smaller box. So you're better off doing this. This is a metal entrance disc from Man Lake. This is a pretty common item. You get it from Grant. This is what I use to close the trap off when you move them, because at nighttime is when you want to pick up the swarm, because that's when all the bees come home. And all you got to do is just click this thing down to the screened area and just pick the trap up and move it. The size of the hole is, I use 1¼ inches. Anywhere from 1 to 1½ inches is acceptable according to Sealy as far as the ideal size for the hole for the swarm trap. And you can't, when you blow this photo up, you can see it, but I have a nail driven right across this hole, and that's to prevent birds and squirrels from taking up residence in the box. I haven't had any problems with that, but better safe than sorry. And then the entrance is traditionally on the bottom right or in the center. It depends on who you talk to, but basically somewhere on the bottom is where you want to be for the entrance. So that's the front of our trap. All right, the back and the side. So I've got a 1-inch screen ventilation hole on the side of the trap, and really this just enables, if a swarm does move in, it enables them to have a little bit of extra ventilation in addition to that front hole. And also, I believe that this little hole allows the scent of the lure to be dispersed more than just through the front hole. So people that I follow always recommend at least 1 or 2 ventilation holes in the side or in the back. But again, you want to screen that in because you just want one entrance for the bees, which is going to be your front entrance. I got the hook and the latch from Home Depot. Really prevents squirrels or raccoons or whatever from trying to open the top when they hang on it. So again, I haven't had any problems, but again, for a couple bucks, it's good insurance. And then this is something that is, I did some research on, and like a lot of people just put like a 2x4 on the back of this box and they hang it on a nail on the tree. And a couple, I mean, that works fine, except for the fact that the people that host the boxes for me, I tell them I'm not going to harm your trees by sticking a nail on it. And also, I find it's more secure with this what they call the French cleat, and it's just easy. And basically, it's just it works better for me. So all a French cleat is, and you can like Google this. It's a 1x6 that's ripped at a 45-degree angle. So if you can see this little slanted piece, that's on the back, and then when you see the next slide, you're going to see that its partner is hanging on the tree. All right, so here's the hanger, right? And again, you can make this as simple as a 2x4 with the other side of this French cleat screwed to it, or I kind of did this kind of deal with, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a bracket, a hinge at Home Depot to tie these two pieces together, because I find that a lot of times it's very, very important with these swarm traps to have them exactly level. You want them level from side to side and front to back, because the bees, especially if you're using foundationless frames, which I use, they build straight down. So if these boxes are hanging at even at a slight angle, you're gonna the comb's gonna be all wonky when you go to take it down. So I want this thing to be exactly level. So that's why I find that having this little hinged model. Oh, did I do that? I guess I did. That allows me to put pieces of wood in here as like a chalk or a shim to make sure that the box is perfectly straight. So again, I have a couple like this and a couple that are just 2x4s with the other half of this French cleat. But you can see, okay, I can move this around, right? So here's one half of the cleat. This is one half of the 1x6 cut at a 45-degree angle, and this is the other half. So when you basically this thing hangs on, it makes a solid connection, and even in a strong wind, it's not going to go anywhere. And the beauty of it is that when the time comes for you to take the bees home, all you do is lift it right off the tree. I mean, it's like there's no drama involved in terms of having a chain and having to unscrew it at nighttime. It's great. All right, so the ratchet strap, I made this. I basically put the ratchet strap through these two holes, and then I tie it around the other side. I tie it around the other side of the tree. It's a bit unwieldy if you're working solo, but I just find that it works better for me. And I use this ratchet strap is called an endless loop ratchet strap. So unlike the ones that you find at Home Depot with the 2 hooks on it, which are very inexpensive, but they're very unwieldy if you're hanging traps by yourself, this thing has no hooks. So basically one end goes right through the other end, and it's a lot easier to manage this on your own. So it's called the endless ratchet strap. There's a link to where I buy them from. They're like $5 or $6, and they hold up to 600 pounds. I think they're meant for deer hunting, for hanging tree stands and stuff. So it's a pretty good solution. And you want to hang these traps between 7 and 15 feet high, and make sure that the entrance or the hole in the front is unobstructed, because you want to give the bees the proper flight path. And again, like Sealy will say 15 feet high, but if you've ever tried to carry a 60-pound box of bees down at nighttime from 15 feet, like the next year you're going to hang them at 7 feet. So, I don't think it makes a big difference. I mean, I think 8 feet high, like as high as you can reach above your head, it's fine. I mean, you may catch statistically more swarms at 15 feet, but again, like time is money. You don't want to be falling off of a ladder at nighttime. It's just not worth it. So you're going to catch plenty of these traps, even at 8 feet, as far as you can get up on a step ladder. We're about halfway through the presentation, so let me pause there and take any questions perhaps that people might have. If not, I'll just go on.
Jim, how successful are you? Jim, can you hear me?
You know what? I'm going to say I put out 7 traps last year, and I caught 6 swarms.
Wow.
Now I didn't catch one on each location. Like I found 2 locations where I caught 3 swarms a year, and again, others I give 2 times, 2 years worth, and then if I don't catch anything, I don't go back there. I find somewhere else. But I recently found a better way to find locations, which I'll be going into, Ron, later in the presentation, which I think has enhanced my success. And it's free and it's kind of creative. So I'll go into that. But yeah, basically, I mean, I think that it's just like fishing, right? You're going to find that some locations you don't get anything. Other ones, you're going to get lucky 3 and 4 times a year, almost as fast as you can hang traps, just because they're close to natural bee sources for whatever reason. All right. So here's the inside of the trap, okay? So I use propolis tincture, which I don't have a recipe here, but Landy has a great recipe for propolis tincture, which I think is probably on our website. That's the recipe I used in making it. Basically, all you got to do is you take some propolis, you take it you keep it in the freezer, you smash it with a hammer, you grind it in a coffee grinder that you're not going to use again, and you infuse it with Everclear alcohol over the course of 4 or 5 weeks, and you keep shaking it up, and over time that propolis is going to leach into the Everclear, and you're going to have a jar of propolis tincture, which is good for colds. It's very good for immunity, but it's also good to paint the inside of your trap with, because it's going to make the trap smell like home. So you want to take that propolis tincture and paint the frame rests and all the corners of the interior of the trap. And some people also will paint around the entrance hole. And then also you'll see back here too, I have a tiny little crock pot. You want to take some of your beeswax that you've saved up and paint some melted beeswax on the interior surfaces, especially if it's a brand new box, right? If it's fresh plywood, you want to make it more or less smell like it's lived in. But traps over the years that have been occupied several times, especially if you don't pick the swarms up right away, if you wait a couple weeks, you're going to get that propolis and that bee smell in the box, and that's going to make those traps more effective next year. The traps can accommodate 5 to 8 frames depending on the dimensions you build, but make sure you have at least 1 frame of this old brood comb. Like stuff that you wouldn't even want in your hive necessarily because it's seen a better day. But this old brood comb with a bunch of cocoons and black stuff is what's going to make that box smell attractive to bees. And so I try to have at least one frame of old brood comb, and the rest you can have just foundation or foundationless. In fact, there's some schools of thought that the more volume you have in a box, the better, because it's more attractive to the scout bees. So that, they don't want to go into a box and see 8 frames of foundation necessarily. If they got that one frame of brood comb that gets them in there, the rest can be foundationless, or just you can have like foundation on there. It's important though, don't include frames with honey. People think that, hey, I'll put some honey in there because bees will think that it's attractive. It's going to bring bees to the hive. It'll bring bees to the hive to rob it out, but they're going to think if there's honey in there that it's an occupied hive, that they're just robbing out. They're not going to think it's necessarily unoccupied, and you're also going to have problems with other pests. So I would not recommend including frames with honey. And again, it's important to make sure that box is level both ways, because those bees are going to build straight down. And you can leave them in there for 2 or 3 weeks if you don't get to the box right away. But again, if it's not exactly level, it's going to be a little bit wonky when you go to do the transfer.
Jim,
All
I'm
right.
just going to interject for 1 second.
Yep.
So apparently webcams are enabled, just FYI to everyone that has theirs on. And that's it, just so everyone knows.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Thanks, Justin. Okay, so as far as attractants go, some people never put an attractant in. If you're in the right area, like I think I'm going to say, if you're in Landy's area, if you're in Landing or Tobacco, you've got a lot of bees and trees. I'm going to say that you could probably just get by with like some propolis tincture, some beeswax, and a box of old brood frame. Here in Montclair, there's a lot fewer, I think, natural bees out there. So you've got to put some kind of lure in that's going to kind of entice them to check the trap out. So just remember, with any lure, less is more. And if you've got a very strong scent, it's going to turn bees off. It may attract them, but they're going to be turned off by it. So I've read anywhere that bees have like a 200 times better sense of smell than humans. So what might not smell to you is definitely smells a lot to the bees. So again, you want at least one frame of black, well-used old brood comb. If you don't have an entire frame, you can use a chunk. Or if you have like some old burr comb scrapings, it doesn't hurt to chuck it in the bottom of the hive. The traditional lure for swarm traps is lemongrass oil. It's very effective. I have some recipes on the next page for that. Again, don't put honey in the hive, because they're going to think the hive is occupied and you're going to get pests. Now, I find that Swarm Commander, which is a company out of South Carolina, I think, it's worth the money. Basically, it smells like lemongrass when you buy it, but the guy claims that there's like Nasinoff gland, and there's some extra stuff in there, and I think it's worth it. I like this, what they call the Super Lure, and again, there's a link on the Adobe version. It looks like an air freshener you might hang in your car. So all you do is you hang this guy around the end of a frame, and you stick it on the bottom of the frame, and that's it. There's no need to refresh the scent throughout the season. Basically, you just set it and forget it. And again, time is money. So this thing is like $13, $14. I don't know how much. It's something like that. It's between $12 and $14. But when you think about it, if you got 10 traps and you have to go every 2 or 3 weeks and like refresh the lemongrass, your time is money. Your time is valuable, and you don't want to be doing that. So for me, for $175 for a package of bees, this thing's $12, and people even say this thing will last up to a couple years. You can reuse it definitely within the season to catch more swarms, and people say it'll last up to 2 years. I think it's a good trade. So, but if you just want to use lemongrass oil, here's a bunch of recipes that you can reference later for using lemongrass oil in these hives. And basically, again, less is more. Here's a standard one, right? Take a half a Q-tip, dip it in lemongrass oil, cover that with a 1 by 1 inch square paper towel, put it in a Ziploc bag, and place it on the top bars. Like, that's a very traditional lure for bait hives. A small prescription bottle, lemongrass oil in a cotton ball or a paper towel. Take a ballpoint pen-sized top, pop it in the top of the prescription bottle. That's going to allow enough of that scent to leak out over the course of the season, to attract bees. And here's somebody that does like, they do like a little beeswax lure. Half a cup of beeswax, 15 drops of lemongrass oil, put it into cupcake molds, and then basically make a loop out of it and hang it in the trap. So that's kind of like a homemade version of what the guy's trying to get at here. Again, these are all things you can try. There's a ton of stuff on the internet and on Facebook, but for me, for $12, that Swarm Commander Super Lure is the way to go. All right. So the right place, right? How do you find good locations to put your box? So just like everything else in beekeeping, right? When you're first starting out, you ask all your neighbors and friends, "Hey, do you have a tree?" You kind of hang a box on it, and that works, right? But it's very scattershot. You know, it may not be the best way to go about it because you're maybe not increasing your chances, giving yourself the best chance. But in a lot of ways, it's like fishing, right? Some spots are definitely better than others. You want to look for trees near an opening on the edge of woods, anything near a pond. I find that the best locations for me are near like small streams or brooks, because bees always need a water source, and they're going to look at they're going to go along water sources and look for places to swarm to. So that's been the number one thing for me, is anywhere near a small pond or a brook or a stream is perfect. Bees use trees like navigational aids. So like a large tree that's by itself in the middle of a field, that's a good candidate because bees are going to use that as an aid to navigation. Bees are known to return to the same location where there have been cutouts before. So if you've done a cutout at a house, you can hang a box on a tree in the yard there, and that's a good location. The oldest part of town, like the part of town with the oldest homes, generally is where there are the oldest trees, where you're going to have better luck catching swarms. People call power line rights of way honeybee highways because, again, bees use these focal points as directional signals. And also they like these ley lines, which are like these ancient lines that people who use, they go dowsing for water or for oil. They know about ley lines. I don't know much about them, but they're basically these ancient lines. They've been mentioned as being highly attractive to honeybees. So that's something to think about. But again, thinking strategically is a lot more effective than just randomly placing traps. But again, consider that your time compounds. So you're going to have to install the trap. If you don't use the Swarm Commander Super Lure, you're going to have to refresh the scent every couple weeks, every few weeks. If they catch a swarm, you're going to have to drive to pick it up, drive the swarm to your apiary, put the box back there. So time is money. So if you can stay close as possible, that's what you should do. I mean, I do have a friend in Bedminster, which is an hour from me, that it's a long way, but his kids like to have the trap there. And they always catch beautiful bees because they're right by the Far Hills race meeting grounds. He's on 5 acres. There's a lot of like old trees and old bees there. And like every year I catch swarms there. So to me, it's worth the drive. But if you can stay within 15 minutes of your house, that's the best because this way it's going to make your life easier. Landy's saying something. Here we go. Swarms usually go at least half a mile away from the home hive. That's right. Okay, good.
Well, no.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Landy, you answered your own question. Okay.
No, well, yeah, because, I have put bait hives like right in the apiary where I know I have permission because, I have bees on that property and they've never caught anything. I think it's too close. How far away do you usually go? About half a mile?
I would say half a mile. Yeah, I would say that's about right,
Okay, so you've got a bait box landlord too.
Yes, that's right. As a matter of fact, like I have, because of my time is money, like edict, ideally I will have 8 hives this year. I got 4 right now, but I got two locations with 4 hives each. This way, when you have to do your oxalic treatments or you go to visit them, it's like you visit 2 spots instead of having 1 hive at 8 different places. Because again, even if they're only 5 minutes away from each other, that time really sucks it up. It compounds. Yeah. So I do have these hosts that are, and they're about a mile away from each other too. To be honest with you. So yeah, that makes sense.
Good.
All right. All right, so here's what I do. I use Google Maps, and again, there's a link here when you have the PowerPoint. But basically, it's maps.google.com, and start with your home location and just start zooming out. And you want to start looking for green patches, right? Forests, parks, large tracts of underdeveloped land. Especially, you see that blue? That blue is a stream, right? So that's perfect. That's a perfect location, something like this. Now, I just picked a random location. I think this is in Livingston, the Central Valley Wetlands, which I never heard of. But if you look at that piece from Google Maps, and then you see here, if I zoom in a little bit, I don't want to make people dizzy with all my zooming, but there's the Sun Valley Apartments. And again, I don't know anything about this spot, but I would drive to the Sun Valley Apartments on some Saturday or Sunday when people are around and look for a house that's right on the edge. And if somebody's mowing their lawn or they're raking their leaves, I would introduce myself as a beekeeper and say hello to the residents and say, listen, are you interested in hosting? People are really, as you all know, everyone loves to save the bees, right? People are into saving the bees. So, first of all, it's not like it was 10 years ago when you could just walk up to someone's house and ring the bell. Because now, like, even though, like, when someone rings a bell at your house, it's weird. You think it's either a Jehovah's Witness or somebody selling Girl Scout cookies, or like, you don't always want to answer the door. But if you can catch someone that's outside their house and just say, hey, listen, by the way, can I ask you a quick question? I'm a beekeeper and I'm interested in saving the honeybee. That's instantly an interesting story to people. And I will tell you that there's nobody that I've asked to host a hive that's ever turned me down. And I don't obviously press for an answer right away. Sometimes I'll bring a bar of soap for them and say, hey, think about it. But like, you know, can I get back to you? I would give them my email address. And I'm like 100% on hits in terms of people that are willing to host these traps for me, because it's kind of a unique thing, especially people have children. They can watch the traps together, especially in a time of quarantine, right? It's something cool to do. And then the beauty of it is if there's a swarm that moves in, you don't have to drive around checking your 10 traps out. Did a swarm move in this week and move on to the next one? You're going to get a phone call saying there's activity in your box, and I think a swarm moved in, and you can come pick it up. So it really saves you a lot of time and effort. So, you know, again, use Google Maps, find places that are like a 10, 15-minute drive from you that are not too close to each other. Stop by and say hello to the residents if anyone's interested in hosting a swarm trap. And what I usually tell them too is, hey, listen, if I get any honey from the bees that I catch, I'll drop a couple pounds off at Christmas time or Thanksgiving. And people love that. And the reality is, right, I'm going to give them honey anyway. It's not like I'm going to say I didn't catch any bees, like, so no honey for you. But it's just it's a nice way to treat people, and it creates really cool relationships. And people love, and it's a way too to promote Essex County Beekeeping Society. I've told people about our meetings and the course, and it's a nice way to create awareness for our group, you know? All right, so more considerations on placement. Some people say to face the entrance east to southeast. Others say to place the box with the entrance towards the setting sun. Some people like to say, I take that frame of black brood and I face it east, because when the sun comes up, the sun's going to warm that very outside frame of black brood, and that's going to release the scent of the wax and the propolis, and that's going to draw bees to the box. Other people say it doesn't matter, right? Like which way you face it, but generally east to southeast, if you can face the hole that way, that's what most people do. Again, 7 to 15 feet off the ground is higher is better, but be aware of the logistics of taking down that heavy trap at night on a ladder. And you know, you are going to catch more swarms higher up, but is it worth it ultimately? I think that if you try this, either like if you can crank out some boxes this year or definitely for next year, you're going to be so successful that you're not going to need like 20 traps out there. You're going to do okay. Again, you want these traps with high visibility. You should be able to see these traps from 100 feet away, because if they're shrouded by leaves, and again, think about when you put the traps out in March, the leaf cover is going to be different in May and June when things start to swarm. So just be aware of that. But if you got traps that are hidden behind leaves and branches, they're really not going to be that occupied. You want it, if it's visible to you, it's going to be visible to the bees also. And you want at least full or partial shade. That the bees are going to reject the box if it overheats. So if you don't have full shade, at least put it in partial shade, or on the north side of the tree trunk. And again, that's probably why you don't want to paint those boxes black. Like a light color, like a gray or a light brown is probably, you want to paint it kind of a light brown because it'll blend in with the trunk. And you know, sometimes if you put them on public land, you don't want vandals to get to them or kids to throw rocks at them. And in fact, on YouTube, there's some people that actually use, they sell stencils for camouflage, and they'll spray paint the stencil on, and they're pretty cool. Like they blend right into the tree. It's pretty neat. And again, when you take a swarm trap down, a lot of times if you have a spare trap, put another one in its place, because there could be more than one set of scout bees ready to move in. And again, you're going to find over time that your best locations offer multiple swarms per season. For whatever reason, they just happen to be lucky locations. Okay, so at the right time. So this is like a little bell curve I put together. Again, not scientific, but when I think about swarm season, I think about June 1st as being kind of like the midpoint of the height of swarm season. And I can tell you that, like, if I hang boxes, like I hung my boxes on April 7th this year, April 7th and 8th, even some people will call me on May 1st and say I found swarms. My phone starts ringing that first week of June, like right around graduation time. People are going to say, hey, like the bees are hitting my box. That's when it starts getting crazy in Jersey. So in New Jersey, you want to look to place your boxes between St. Patrick's Day and, let's say, tax season, right? Between St. Patrick's Day and April 15th, because you want them out there about a month before the swarms typically heat up, because those scout bees are going to be checking those boxes out. Well, they decide where to go well in advance of them actually swarming. And again, this is a very early spring. So some years like 2020, you want to err on the side of being early, because you're going to start seeing activity soon. And again, the scout bees will check out the locations, and they're going to figure out where they're going to go long before they actually decide to swarm. And I will leave my boxes up until August 1st to September 1st. I mean, really, August 1st, I take them down. The reason being that you can catch late swarms, but later in the season, your chance of having yellow jackets move into that box increases, and your chances of having bees move in decreases. And you don't want to, you can leave the box up until the first frost, and then like the yellow jackets will be dead most likely, and take them out. But it's just a pain in the neck. Like playing the odds, the season's done definitely by August 1st. So, you know, you probably want to take them down by then. I mean, you will catch fall swarms, but they're going to be smaller, and they're going to be more difficult to overwinter because they're not going to have as many resources. But if you want to, you could take those small fall swarms and pinch the queen and just use the brood to combine with one of your weaker hives. You could definitely do that. That's not an issue whatsoever. So what does success look like? Like, how are you going to know, and how are you going to tell your sponsors that you know you caught a swarm? So you're going to see scout bees all the time, but that doesn't mean that a swarm has moved into the trap. So again, the scout bees are going to be like hovering. They're going to be going around all sides of the trap. They're going to be kind of hovering up and down, measuring out the size of the trap, but it doesn't mean that they occupy the trap. So when you see an actual swarm, you're going to see significant volume, just like you would like a beehive. You're going to see significant volume, and you're going to see a significant level of activity. And all I can say is you're going to see the bees coming and going with a sense of purpose. Like they're going to be going right in and out of that hole. They're not going to be like moving around the outside of the box and like doing what looks like an orientation flight. They're going to be there on business. But the best two indicators are you're going to see pollen coming in on the legs of the bees. And that means that they've accepted the hive and the queen has begun to lay. So you're going to see pollen coming in. And the other way that I tell people that host these hives, I said, you know, you can go up, if you hang them 8 feet high, people can see pollen without getting on a ladder, right? They can just, I tell them, listen, hang out on the side of that hole. You're not going to bother the bees. You can look for pollen. It's kind of fun. They find it interesting. So if you see pollen on the legs, definitely that's a good sign. And then the bees are going to be there through dusk. So like if you've got bees that remain there through nightfall and definitely after nightfall, that swarm trap has been occupied because scout bees are going to go home at nighttime. So those are the two best indicators that I tell people to make, you know, to let them know that a swarm has moved in for sure. And then at that point, that's when I'm going to come some night. I'll say, listen, I don't have to come tonight. They're not going to hurt you. Leave them up there for 2 or 3 nights, and I'll be by on like Tuesday night. I'll text you before I come, or I'll call before I come. And then,
And can I interject for 1 second?
yeah.
Ron, Barbara, Charlie, Jean, Ted, Vin, do you guys mind shutting off your webcam? I've had some participants message me. You can keep on going, Jim.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do I have a pic of one of my traps in the tree? I do have a video. Justin, let me wait until the end. I'll see if I can play that right before the end, because remember we tried it and it was kind of, you can kind of hear it, but kind of not. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we can post a link to it too.
Oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I do have a video where I narrate a hive that's moved, the swarm that's moved in, and kind of what to look for. All right, so you can move the bees as soon as you see pollen coming in, but it's best to move those bees after nightfall when all the foragers have returned, because you don't want to leave bees on the table, so to speak. So what I do is after dusk, and again, like in June 20th, dusk is going to be 9:30 or 9:15, 9 o'clock, which is another reason you don't want to drive an hour away to pick up your bees, just because it's a late night by the time you get back home. So you want to get there around dusk. Once nightfall is hit, you want to close up the trap. Again, take that disc and move it to the screened portion. You want to put it in your car, obviously, move it to your apiary and open the disc. And the next morning, the bees are going to begin to reorient. And again, be mindful of the distance between your swarm trap and where you want to keep the bees permanently. More than 3 miles is best. Now, my bees are in Glen Ridge and Montclair, so a lot of times I don't have 3 miles. I used to get hung up like years ago on like moving them 3 miles away for a week and then moving them back. But again, that just takes a lot of your time up. So I find, to be frank with you, if you get those bees soon enough, like within the first week, and you move them even like a mile away, you're going to get like 90% of the bees. I mean, you are going to have some bees return to the old site, but they're eventually going to find new hives, and they're going to be okay. But it's just not worth your time to be moving them, 10 miles away for a week and then moving them back. I just don't think, and especially if like when you move them to your apiary for good, like when at nighttime when you open them up, if you could put some like leaves or something in front of the little hole or some branches, that's going to force them to reorient, and you're going to be okay. I mean, again, time is money. Ideally you want it to be more than 3 miles, but Landy's saying half a mile is usually fine. So that's cool. Okay, that makes me feel better. If Landy says it, I feel better. So, all right. And you can leave your bees in the swarm trap for a couple weeks, literally, because there are frames in there. So the positive to that is that trap's going to absorb that hive smell, and it's going to be a more successful trap over time. The negative to that is you might have to do a cutout for buildup below the frames, right? Again, bees are funny. Like, they won't necessarily fill out all those 5 or 6 frames before they start building beneath the frames. So you may have to basically like get a knife and cut out. To be frank with you, if it's just wax, I just throw it away. But if there's brood in there, I'll do a cutout of the portion below the frames, and I'll rubber band that brood into empty frames and just put it in the new hive, because you don't want to waste brood. But by and large, if you get those bees in the first week, you're not going to have that issue, But I have caught some monster swarms. I mean, I can't believe, like, someone will say to me, hey, these bees just moved in 3 days ago, and I'll pick that box up and there'll be like 12 pounds of bees. And I'm like, wow, that's crazy. So, I mean, you will get a real delta between the size of the swarms that you catch, All right, so here's just a little tip and trick for Swarm Hive Toolkit. Like, if you want to get into this, some real inexpensive stuff that's going to help you out. Well, first and foremost is you want a red and light headlamp for observing the bees and moving the traps at night, because bees can't see red light or they don't react to it. So one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to click on your white light headlamp when you go to move these bees at nighttime, because the bees are going to be very perturbed. But they can't see red, and Amazon, you can get them for like $12, $15. A really nice headlamp that has red and white light, and you want to use the red one picking the swarm up at nighttime. And really, anytime you observe bees at nighttime, it's good to use red light because they don't react to it. And again, these two guys are links to Harbor Freight, so when you get the PDF, you can just click on it. This is like $2. It's a level. It's a torpedo level. It's a little orange level that's about 6 inches long. This way you make sure that your swarm trap is absolutely level from side to side and front to back, especially when you're using foundationless frames, because again, they're going to build straight down. Small wood blocks and shims, which will help you shim up the trap to make sure that it's level when you're hanging on a tree. This thing is like a $25 step stool from Harbor Freight. It's an aluminum step stool where you get the 20% off coupon. It's like $20. It's a pretty cool thing because it's a step stool that folds flat. It's the perfect size for working your hives. So basically, you take this step stool and you put it beside you, and it's an instant stand for your supers. When you go to like take supers off to inspect your hive, it's perfect because it'll fit them perfectly. You can crisscross them. But also, it makes it easier to hang that trap because it's going to give you, let's say, 3 feet of extra height. But it's also going to make sure that you don't go up too high when you hang the trap. It'll limit your height to 8 to 10 feet, so you're not going to get into trouble when it comes to retrieving the swarm. Screen and duct tape. What happened is I made those traps like the horizontal hive guy had, and I had this slot. I had the horizontal slot for the entrance like he had, and then I put those I had those the Better Bee plastic entrance discs, but it almost covers it, but there are little gaps of a 1/4 inch where bees can get out. So I take some flexible screen and I'll screen them and duct tape them in because you don't want any bees crawling around your car when you're driving them home. So again, if you use a circular hole and you use those Man Lake metal entrance discs, you're not going to have that problem. And if I could do it again, I'd do all 1 1/4 inch circular holes. I'd use the horizontal hives plans, but I just use 1 1/4 inch round holes because it's just easier that way. But again, screen and duct tape never hurts. And then a small spray bottle with some water. If you've got bees that are hanging out, like if you go to pick up a trap in June or July and it's warm out, and there's already a lot of bees in that trap, they're going to be bearding just like they would on a hive, like in your apiary. So if you take a really light mist, again, turn on your red headlamp, take a really light mist, and you mist those bees, you're going to encourage them, a lot of them, to move into the trap after nightfall when you go to take them away. This way, you're going to maximize, the number of bees that you catch. We got 2 slides left, so we're coming to the end. So I would challenge you to give it a try, right? If you're going to budget yourself for 2 hives next year, 2 packages is like what? It's like $350, $400. First of all, I would buy a nuke. If you're going to buy a nuke, go to Landy, go to Grant. That's probably your best way over a package. But if you've got some extra money, instead of buying 1 package, or instead of buying 2 packages, buy 1 package and take what you would have spent on the other nuker package and spend it on, a 4x8 sheet of plywood at Home Depot is like $25. Screws, paint, the swarm lure is $12. So you can make a lot of these things with, let's say $100, certainly $150 worth of, some of that money you can even put towards buying tools. If you don't, buy a compressor, with the brad nailer or a stapler from Harbor Freight. I mean, that'll make your life so much easier when it comes to making frames too, or boxes. It pays for itself, So definitely take some of that money you would spend on buying packages and maybe try this next year. I find that it's easy and it's fun, and it provides a reliable supply of feral bees and local bees that are going to augment your apiary operations and give you a lot of flexibility going forward. And then here are some helpful, I love this quote. So I went to a presentation at the Philadelphia Beekeepers Guild. This woman said, "YouTube has killed more bees than the Varroa mite," which I thought was hilarious. But these are some tried and true sources, helpful links that I found. And again, you can get them when it comes to when the PDF comes out. Dr. Leo Sharaskin, he's the guy that designed the trap where you can get the free plans. But this is like a little treatise on how he chooses locations, when to hang them. A lot of the stuff I discussed in this article, in this presentation, he has that. Cayman Reynolds, this guy, Tennessee's Bees, on YouTube, has a lot of good stuff on beekeeping, swarm trapping, but he's just a really good, reliable resource. This guy, Woolly Bee, he has a swarm trap how-to video collection of about 5 videos. And he has this interesting thing where in order to find out good locations in the early winter, he uses anise flavored sugar water. He buys like anise flavoring from the supermarket, flavors sugar water with it, and puts those out. And if he sees that that jar is empty after a couple days, he knows it's going to be a good place to put a swarm trap up in the spring. And he details that in these videos. I'm always amazed at YouTube that people they're so generous with their time. They're excellent at editing these videos, and they're putting it out there for free. And I'm really grateful for these folks to share their resources. Mr. Ed, who's down in Louisiana, Jeff Horchoff, he's got a lot of good videos about beekeeping in general, but he's got a bunch on baiting and placing swarm traps, which are good. And then this guy, Steve's Mixed Bag out of northeastern Pennsylvania, he's got this is like a 20, 30-minute video on, he actually builds a box. I think he's the one that uses the camouflage stencil for the outside of his box. Some real good information. And then also, again, this gentleman, Bee Catcher, Swarm Trap Construction. So any one of these, really good resource to check out. And then that's my presentation. So I want to say thank you to ECBS, but especially Justin and Landy. Landy is the program's chairperson, and Justin, who helped me out with, first of all, providing us with this awesome technology and for helping me walk through it. I'm very grateful. That's my email address. I will put it out to the members of ECBS. If you want to email me and say, hey, listen, I have an interest in getting some bees this year. If I catch more bees than I need for my apiary, I'll email you guys and we can meet up. And basically the way it works is I'll say, listen, give me $130. I'll give you $100 back when you return the trap to me. That's basically a deposit on the trap. And then the $30 just helps me to defray the expense of that swarm lure and build some frames, because I'm giving the frames back. Obviously you're taking the frames for your hive. So it's just a way for me to help defray my expenses, and it'll give you some bees for really inexpensively. If you took the course this year, but you didn't get a chance to order a package or a nuke, and you're still interested, just shoot me an email and I'll keep a list. And I'm happy to share the bounty. If I get some traps this year, I'm happy to share the bounty with you, for a few bucks. And again, I love this. My wife and I went to St. Anne de Beaupré in Quebec a couple years ago, and there's a beautiful window in the cathedral there of the bees. And travail is the French word for work, and so the bee's life is to work. And I just thought this is a very beautiful window that I wanted to have as the last slide. And I don't know if it's because this cathedral's in Canada, but to me this beehive looks like the Stanley Cup. I don't know. It looks kind of weird to me, but So anyway, with that, I'd like to thank you for your time, and I'm happy to open it up for questions, or perhaps you would just want to have a general discussion among the beekeepers. So if you have your microphone, if you want to unmute it.
Jim, I'm just going to add a few more things onto that before we get into a general discussion. I did post earlier in the public chat a link to our meeting documents. For everyone who's a new member, the presentations, minutes, all of that gets posted. It's publicly available for everybody to access. You can just go to the website, and you'll see under the news section, meeting documents. That includes the presentation Jim just gave with all the links. And we also were contacted last month by Parks Tally, who updated his Snell Grove presentation and added some videos. And was really gracious and reshared the presentation for us. And that's also available on there so that you can watch what he's added and hopefully get more out of that presentation, which was already a fantastic presentation. I think Jim did a great job tonight, and I am so happy to see that we had a pretty nice group come out.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Justin, and I appreciate, like, this is just my chance to give back because I get so much out of the ECBS meetings, and people give so much of their time, constant advice on the Facebook group, and I just like it. I'm just happy I'm able to pay it forward a little bit, and if people get something out of it, then everybody wins.
Yep, I think this is I think this meeting was a great success. I'm going to stop the recording so that everyone can talk and share webcams and do whatever you guys want to do for the remainder of this time. We can do whatever we want.
Great.
Jim, do you have